London, 1837. Queen Victoria accedes to the British throne. Charles Dickens publishes the first instalment of his new novel, Oliver Twist. The painter John Constable succumbs to heart failure in his sleep. And while treading a dusky path on Clapham Common, a servant girl reports a terrifying encounter with someone, or something, that was soon to become the Victorian era's very first monster. This is the curious and unnerving story of Spring Hill Jack. The girl, named Mary Stevens, was on her way to work at a house in South London's Lavender Hill when, according to her report, a phantom-like figure leapt from the darkness, gripping her with what she described as cold and clammy claws, like those of a corpse. The figure restrained her, and to her horror began to kiss her face, only to flee suddenly when Mary's screams drew the attention of local residents who came swiftly to her aid. This single, terrifying encounter engendered a popular mystery that stirred imaginations, finding fertile ground amid the gas lamps and dingy slums of 19th century London, one that would endure for at least 6 decades, with further encounters in major cities around Great Britain. The birth of a demon. The evening after Stephen's encounter, a figure matching the description of her assailant leapt in front of a horse-drawn carriage, causing the coachman to veer from the road and crash, an accident that left him with severe injuries. Witnesses claim the perpetrator escaped by leaping clean over a 9-foot wall, cackling with high-pitched laughter as he went. Strangely, sightings of a mysterious leaping man were first reported as early as a decade before these 2 consecutive encounters, but the aggressive and mischievous nature detailed in the new reports brought greater attention, and an urban legend was born. Dubbed Spring Hill Jack in the press on account of his ability to jump great heights to evade capture, London's new menace morphed as word spread from a man into a mythological terror. With further sightings, his ghastly credentials took shape. In many testimonies, he was dressed as a gentleman, with a long cape or cloak, but with a face resembling popular portrayals of the devil. He was tall and thin, with red, glowing eyes, and several of his victims claimed that he breathed blue or white flames. Perhaps most frighteningly, he had a fondness for attacking his victims with cold, sharp, some said metallic, claws. More sightings. The most famous encounter of Spring Hill Jack happened during the evening of the 19th of February 1838 and involved a woman called Jane Alsop. She was at home when a man appeared at her door claiming to be a police officer. The man claimed to have apprehended Spring Hill Jack in a nearby lane and asked her to bring him a light. When she returned with a candle, he threw off his cloak and presented a most hideous and frightful appearance. The man spewed blue and white flame and had eyes like red balls of fire. He wore a helmet and close-fitting clothes like a white oilskin. He attacked Alsop, shredding her gown with his claws and tearing at her neck and arms. She managed to escape, and the attacker fled when Alsop's sister came to her rescue. 9 days later, the demon struck again, this time in the Limehouse area of East London, near to where Jack the Ripper plied his bloody trade half a century later. Lucy Scales was returning from her brother's house with her sister when a tall, thin gentleman appeared and spurted blue flame into her face, blinding her momentarily and causing her to fall into the grip of a violent seizure. Scales reported that the man wore a cloak and carried a bullseye lantern like the ones issued to the police at the time. He didn't speak, nor try to grab either of the sisters, but fled the scene quickly. Years later, in 1866, Spring Hill Jack was suspected of orchestrating an attack on a military barracks in Aldershot, ignoring the shouts of the guards as he approached, and when they eventually opened fire, bullets seemed to have no effect. Once again, he escaped into the darkness with what were described as astonishing bounds. In 1877, he was spotted at Newport Arch in Lincoln, but as an angry mob closed in, he leapt safely beyond their clutches. Later, Spring Hill Jack was noticed walking along the roof of St Francis Xavier's Church in Salisbury Street in the Everton region of Liverpool. But while reports of Jack spread geographically, they began to fall in number, and eventually dried up altogether. With the turn of the new century, he slipped from public consciousness completely, without ever having been identified. Who was he? Like his very real Victorian namesake, Jack the Ripper, the true identity or identities of Spring Hill Jack remain a mystery. Perhaps the least convincing theory put forward was that he was a supernatural or extraterrestrial being, despite claims that he could jump onto rooftops and breathe fire. More probable is that he was a criminal prankster, a real person or people driven to wreak havoc in creative ways, using contraptions, chemicals, and practice techniques to create the illusion of superpowers upon naive and unsuspecting victims. A potential explanation was proposed as early as January 1838, just a few months after Jack sprang onto the scene. During a public session at London's Mansion House, the Lord Mayor of London, Sir John Constable, revealed that he had received an anonymous complaint from someone identifying themselves only as a resident of Peckham, a London neighbourhood. The letter laid the blame for the attacks on high-born young men acting on a prank-inspired wager to visit London houses dressed as a ghost, a bear, or a devil, and scare the occupants. The letter stated, "At one house, the man rang the bell, and on the servant coming to open the door, this worse than brute stood in no less dreadful figure than a spectre clad most perfectly." The consequence was that the poor girl immediately swooned, and has never from that moment been in her senses. The affair has now been going on for some time, and, strange to say, the papers are still silent on the subject. The writer has reason to believe that they have the whole history at their finger ends, but through interested motives are induced to remain silent. Was it a conspiracy or cover-up to protect wealthy and entitled heirs? For his own part, the Lord Mayor was of the opinion that the greatest exaggerations had been made, and that although he had heard a first-hand account of someone appearing to a servant girl dressed in a bearskin, scaring her into fits, it was not possible that a ghost performs the feats of the devil upon the earth. At one point, the finger of suspicion pointed towards an Irish nobleman called Henry Beresford, 3rd Marquis of Waterford, who earned a reputation throughout the 1830s for brawling, jokes and vandalism, as well as contempt for women, all of which earned him the honorific the Mad Marquis. Or perhaps a secret society was to blame, with individuals taking it in turns to adopt the identity of the monster and carry out pre-agreed attacks, running away each time when the dare or wager was fulfilled. Group hysteria. Copycat attacks, inspired by the sudden spring-heeled Jack legend, is another theory, which could also explain the number, diversity and geographical spread of reported sightings, as well as the longevity of his reign of terror. Sightings were perhaps also the result of a heightened sense of fear, mass hysteria, folklore or tales from penny dreadfuls made real, with accounts and retellings becoming increasingly exaggerated. Or people just made it up, hoping that an encounter with the monster would be a ticket to fame and fortune. A combination of all these factors likely played a part, but of course we can't be sure who the monster really was, and probably never will. Like all good mysteries, the intrigue and fascination that surrounds the legend is a big part of its appeal, evidenced by the long line of urban legends, whodunits and obscurities that followed Spring-Heeled Jack, the genre's founding father. If you've enjoyed this story, then there's plenty more where it came from. Why not consider the legend of the Devil's Footprints, or the stellar ascent of Victorian mesmerism? Please do like, subscribe and turn on notifications. Say hello in the comments. And most importantly, thank you for watching. See you soon.